Well, hi and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thought I'd just come outside today, a little bit of sunshine out here, and I want to talk about a topic today that probably gets skipped over a bit these days. My title of this is something along the lines of, do real photographers use tripods? In this day and age of people having cameras that have got inbuilt image stabilisation in the camera body like Pentax, and then a lot of the others have the stabilisation built into the lens, and also with the high ISO speeds and high shutter speeds, you're able to hold your camera pretty steady these days without a tripod. And probably people would skip the idea of using a tripod on most occasions, but is there still a place for them? I think there is, and let's just explore this a little bit. I'm going to post underneath this video a link to an article I wrote about this on my blog as well some time ago, and that might fill in some of the gaps that I might forget as I talk off the top of my head. So let's just go back a little bit and have a look at what the early pioneers did with tripods. And in the early days of photography, it was just essential that you had a tripod, because the exposure, the shutter speeds had to be so slow that you just couldn't hand hold it, and tripods were a must. And even when taking portraits of people and group portraits as well, people had to hold very still so there was no movement. So tripods were essential in the early days of photography. One of my heroes, I've probably talked about on here before, is Darius Kinsey and his wife Tabitha. This is called Kinsey Photographer, and he was, I think he might have died in the early 1900s, but him and his wife were amazing in what they did in the logging forests of Washington State, I think it was, and he was a commercial photographer. But I just want to show you, he used very big cameras and shot on glass plates, and but I want to show you just a picture of him in this book with the range of tripods and cameras and equipment that he was using, his old car, and just have a look at this. This is amazing, really. I'll try and put a picture of this somewhere. But you can have a look there. There's Darius with all his equipment, very big tall tripod there, and all sorts of folding cameras, and just come in a bit closer. He was an amazing photographer. He used to take the photos and his wife used to process them in their home studio. And that's possibly taken out the front of his home studio. And I think I read somewhere in this book that he eventually died from injuries sustained fallen when he fell from the top of a tripod, I think. Anyway, that's just to give you an idea of what the early pioneers did. All those early, excuse me, early photographers were using substantial tripods, most of them made out of wood, and the early ones that we were using, modern man was using, I suppose, were also made out of wood. I have one here. This is a beauty that I inherited from someone. It's a wooden one. It's got spikes on the bottom so that goes into the grass, so you wouldn't use it too well indoors. These poles slide down here and you tighten them down the bottom down here. One of the good things about this tripod is that it's also got a tilt and swivel head on it there. You can see that there, so I just loosen that and that goes around. And even modern cameras, modern tripods, professional ones, have the option of having a tilt and swivel head on them, which are very good to get angles quickly. And also they have the other type as well, which I'll show you in a minute. Just put that back over there. I must get around to using that one day with an old camera just for the heck of it. So then I'll come back to the modern tripod in a minute. I'll go back a bit further. When photography was becoming popular back probably 100 years ago, and around about when the box brownie was starting to come in, a lot of people were getting these, what they called these vest cameras, pocket cameras like that, that you could put in your vest. And this one is it's a Kodak, a 620 Kodak with a code-on shutter. It's got some adjustments on it, and you look through these little prisms up here to have your view. You can tilt that way if you want to take a horizontal shot and look down through the top there, or if you're taking a portrait shot, you turn it back and you look down through the top there. And these are beautiful little cameras, bellows cameras. One of the things that they innovated on these was, see this little lever here, that just folds into the camera like that, but when you want to, instead of using a tripod, you can actually just put it on a table and that holds the camera steady like that. I noticed on this one, and I hadn't noticed it before when I was doing a little bit of research on doing this, there's a screw hole here. I haven't got that out, but when I look inside at that screw in there, it looks like it's about the same thread as a tripod, so I think you could probably put your tripod on there. But that's, people started using these, and I mean, you could handhold these if you had a fast film. I've used this before 620 film was phased out, and I got some reasonable shots just hand holding the camera. But back in those days, those films would have been a lot slower. So they would have relied on a tripod or on the tabletop steadier. Around about that time, they started manufacturing these type of tripods. This one's got, I can pull it out, these brass things that come all the way out, and it can actually open up to quite a height. I won't do that. It's a bit tricky getting them back in. Got these little things that can hurt your fingers a bit. This was my dad's tripod. This has also got the tilt and swivel on it, like that. And I've got photos of him using this. He used to use this quite often, particularly when he was using his movie cameras, his 8mm movie cameras. But that's a family treasure. I wouldn't ever get rid of that. That was my dad's, and he was my first mentor in photography. And so a lot of people had those, and then they started bringing out similar things to that, but more modern ones, which is this type of thing. And that's got tubular. It opens up in the same way as the other one does, but it's got a little handle to wind it up. Wind up the, if I can do that, hang on a second. Get that out the road. Ah, that's right, it goes that way. So that winds up. And this is similar in style to the modern tripods, only it's an old-fashioned one. You can still get these around the place. I've got about 4 of them. Whenever I see one, they usually sell very cheaply, and they're very handy to have in your kit. Even if I was doing a YouTube video and just using my phone or another camera, I can quickly put that on, put it on a tabletop or on the ground, and that works pretty well. So that comes to the modern type of tripod, which is this one here. This is a Manfrotto, and you've got all your adjustments on here going up and down like that. I've got another one like this that's got a smooth head on it for video work. You can tilt it that way. And the good thing about these is you have a quick release. So when you're doing wedding work, you can just pull this lever back and take it off quickly. Put it in there, snaps back in like that. Whoops, hang on. Now it's snapped back in. I'll just come up and show you that again because some people might not have seen these. These tripods aren't all that dear to buy. So there's the lever just there. See where my thumb is? You just click that and off it comes. So they're very handy, and if you're a serious photographer, mainly landscape photographers probably, you would definitely go with one of those and use them. Particularly if you're trying to take video with a digital SLR or a mirrorless video camera, you'd probably want to have your tripod, even though it might have inbuilt stabilisation. I look back on all the the video that I've done on my mini, let's bring that in a bit there, all the video that I've done on my mini DV cameras and never used a tripod on most of it. My Canon XL1 mini DV camera had inbuilt image stabilisation, but even so, a lot of that footage was a little bit shaky when you're zooming in at the telephoto end of the zoom. So I would recommend that if you are doing video using a digital SLR, to make sure you've got it on a tripod. One of the old, well, I don't know, he's old, he's probably younger than me, I don't know. Peterson, you might have heard of. He does a lot of tuition. He's written lots of books on photography. His most famous one is called Understanding Exposure. And one of the things he says at the end of every sentence or every article on different types of exposures, he says, the first thing he says in most of those articles is, first of all, mount your camera on a tripod. That was his mantra, and it probably still is, I don't know. But it's not a bad procedure. There are uses that for a tripod when you're doing weddings that a couple of, you'll find this in my blog anyway, but there's a couple of things when you're doing family portraits and large portraits of people in a wedding party. This is for those who are interested in doing that sort of thing. One of the things when you've got lots of people that you want to photograph in a hurry and they're all milling around all over the place, what I would do, I would set my tripod up somewhere where I wanted to take the photos. I wouldn't even have the camera on it. And most people, when they see a tripod, they think, oh, professional photographer. And I would say to people, I'd yell out, everyone, we're going to do some family photos now, can you gather over there where the tripod is? Now, I would probably put the camera on the tripod, but sometimes I wouldn't even do it because I was able to get away without using the tripod. But it's a good way of drawing people's attention to where you want them to be and to move them around. So just try that next time. There's probably lots more I could say about it. I think the best thing is to have a look at my blog post. There's probably a couple of things on there that I haven't mentioned here. But yes, you can get away without using a tripod, but there are some types of photography you probably just can't. You know, if you're doing pictures of the heavens and time exposures and all that sort of stuff, you really need to have a tripod. So if you haven't got one, I would recommend that you get one. Probably one of these Manfrotto ones that aren't all that dear. The ones with a tubular stand are the more stable. You can get cheaper tripods that have got sort of rectangular legs that just fold in amongst themselves or in on top of themselves, but they're not as stable and as steady as these tubular steel tripods. So there you go. Does a real photographer use a tripod? I think probably you should be somewhere along the way. But you can do a heck of a lot of photography these days because the modern technology. One thing I forgot to mention, of course, if you don't have a tripod and you're wanting to take some shots handheld and you want to have the camera steady without too much shake in it, one of the rules of thumb is that if you set your shutter speed to the focal length of the lens you're using, for instance, what I mean by that is if you've got a 28mm wide angle lens on your camera, on your SLR, if you set your shutter speed to the corresponding shutter speed that corresponds with the focal length, for instance 28mm lens, I would set the shutter speed to 1/30th of a second on your camera. And if you've got a 200mm lens, set the shutter speed to 250th on your camera. The ISO part of it will take care of itself because you'll have the right ISO for that exposure. But that's just a little tip. That saved me a few times when I was doing photos, and it's something that if you know that rule, you can actually take advantage of that when you're out on the fly, taking photos of people and at weddings and all that sort of stuff. So once again, thanks for watching. Like if you like, subscribe if you subscribe, and I'll see you next time.